Let's start with melodrama and metaphor, because sometimes those can flip the switch and make us see the world in new ways. I was living in Los Angeles in 2007, and I saw this video that shook me up. It was two artists, Catherine Miller and David Owner, and they were in the desert, and they were dressed up as surgeons. And they had a patient that they were running around on the desert, and the patient was a lawn, and it was supported by an IV drip. And they were running out to the aqueduct. They were running out to fossil fuel plants. And I got really unnerved by this video. It was macabre, sort of funny, but it had a penetrating insight that made me think, and I needed to get away. And I went up into the hills of Los Angeles. And later that week, I came up to Las Vegas, and I stayed in a hotel room. And when I opened up the blinds in the morning, I saw this green, lush valley, and I saw it surrounded by brown hills, just like Los Angeles. And that was a moment for me where I realized that the entire valley of these huge cities were on an IV drip, and that they were using resources from far away. So I work in architecture and landscape architecture, and my passion is basically to make people understand how they connect to nature through design. And my job is getting harder, because cities are getting bigger. The United States, as an example, in the late 1800s had about 50 million people. We now have 350 million people. And most of those people have migrated into the cities from rural areas. So to think about the time and how quickly this has happened, 5 to 6 generations is your great-grandmother, your grandmother, your mother, you, and your children. This has happened in a very short time. So we're living in cities and we begin to feel disconnected from nature. We live in Las Vegas during the week, and in the weekend we have this distinct and separate experience out in the desert. And we don't see those two things related, but they are. The city lies within a matrix of ecosystems and design natural resources. Nature has co-evolved with us over human history. And we've pushed nature farther and farther out as we've sprawled, and it becomes harder and harder for us to relate to it. We are the first generations in human history to live this way, and most generations after us will live this way, with further abstraction from our natural resources. We have these terms that aren't necessarily accessible and not exciting to hear: nature, systems, bioregions, and then this dreadful word of infrastructure that we use as designers and urban planners. And the root of infrastructure is infra, meaning unseen or beneath. And typically, our resources are outside of the spectrum of what we see. So let's use Las Vegas as an example. This is the Las Vegas Springs Preserve. This is the original source of water for the city of Las Vegas. This source of water was right across the train tracks from the downtown. Back then and today, you could walk over and see where your water resources were. Except today, this isn't where our principal water resources are. They're here. Off in the distance, you can see the river at the top of this image. It's behind mountains, and it clearly doesn't look like it's accessible. For scale, this thin line that you see going across the image over the middle is a 6-lane highway corridor. So our resources are abstract and huge. What keeps me up at night is thinking about how we're going to understand where our resources come from and how we plan for those. And we have a mountain of scientific data available to us, but science is not going to make us sustainable. Anthropology is. We need to be able to understand and make meaning out of this information and share it and discuss it to plan for a better future for our cities. We must understand that our cities are connected to a larger region, and it's connected through a series of systems. I had a moment in graduate school in college when I went to the University of Illinois, and I read William Cronin's Nature's Metropolis. Nature's Metropolis describes the city of Chicago as a case study. In the book, Cronin demolishes the idea that the city and the country are two different things. For example, the agricultural system. The entire Midwestern region of the country was prairie grasses, and it was changed to corn, soy, and wheat. And that corn, soy, and wheat formed the basis for the food that allowed the city of Chicago to grow to the size it was. The city and the region were inextricably linked to one another. So for me to flip the switch, I had a moment of crisis. In 2007, I moved from Los Angeles to Phoenix. And I had this practice. I was trying to make it, by 40. Everybody needs to be famous by 40 if they're going to be somebody. And I had work in Panama. I had work in China. I was working with a firm that was the 2008 Firm of the Year. And that firm closed and all my work dried up. And I found myself in the desert. It was no longer the lush environment of Los Angeles. And at the same time, Arizona State University was on the verge of becoming the biggest university in the country, and it was championing the flag of sustainability. And I started talking to people in Arizona about sustainability. And I realized that none of us knew a whole lot. Or if we knew a whole lot, it was about one thing. And nobody knew how to take all that information and connect it to place, to use it, to make it meaningful. And I said, well, if I'm going to be here for a while, I want to lead an initiative with faculty and students to do a sustainability atlas so we can figure out how to make Phoenix a place that's sustainable long term. So I'm going to use Scottsdale as an example of this. I've been at UNLV for 18 months. Scottsdale is a good example because it's also a desert city. It shares some of the same issues as Las Vegas does, and it actually shares a lot of the same infrastructure as Las Vegas does. And I'm going to show you 20 images from the report. Please realize they can't be read. I'm sure you've already figured that out by now. But I wanted you to get a flavor for what the content is inside of the report. The way the Sustainability Atlas works is we anchor it to a place. So this can either be a municipal region or it can be a city. We're in the first steps of starting this for Las Vegas, and we will anchor it around the metropolitan region here. The next thing we talk about is the systems. So we describe the water, the energy, the agriculture, the transportation, the waste, and the ecosystems that support the city. Each one of these systems gets a narrative, and that narrative is put inside a plot. These characters have things that are going to make them change over time. We have issues such as urban heat island, climate change, and drought. And each of these are going to have a different impact on us. So we try to make this story something that anybody could understand. We can't keep the science in the ivory tower, or we can't keep it in the hands of the planners. We need to get it out to people so that they understand it, so we can plan with them. And the stories that we talk about within each one of the systems takes the big picture of the region, brings the issues down into the city, and we try to take it all the way to your neighborhood to talk about the effects that you would feel in your ways of life. And finally, we talk about the implications of what could happen in different scenarios or different plots. So you'll have something happen with energy, you'll have something happen that's different with water. We used infographics and text and stitched the story together from the region to the place in the atlas. We tried to create a hierarchy of issues within the atlas rather than bombard people with information. So for example, in water, 3/4 of our water use goes to outdoor landscaping purposes. Only 10% is used in our showers. So do we want to do first priority low flow shower heads, or do we want to look at our outdoor landscaping? These are the things that we tried to communicate through the atlas about where we should put our priorities and our resources. We had a lot of misconceptions along the way, that we had a lot of preconceptions along the way that we had dispelled by the Sustainability Atlas. We thought agriculture was going to be a tremendous problem for us. What we learned through doing this report and taking an inventory in the atlas of the agricultural system in the Southwest is that we had all of our US RDA nutrients within our bioregion, or within a day or two's drive of Phoenix. And this would also go for Las Vegas. And we discovered the power of maps. This was around 2008 to 2010 that we did this report, and maps have become much more sophisticated in the time since this report. But transportation is a really good example of how maps can reveal issues. We were able to figure out where everybody lived, where everybody worked, and how they got back and forth to work, and when they got back and forth to work. So that's kind of NSA scary, but that data is out there, right? So maps hold an incredible power to reveal things for us about how we can redesign our future. And putting this all together in a sustainability atlas gives us a manual to understand our place. Atlas was a titan. He wasn't a god, so it's not as fun to say he was the god of navigation. But he was the titan of navigation. And he was also the titan that held up the world. The atlas is an opportunity for us to create a foundation of knowledge in our places, and a first step to a path for a brighter future. Thank you.